The JSE tracked its global peers in late Thursday, while the rand weakened sharply, reversing all of its gains and more from the previous day's budget speech as the currency followed the direction of the US dollar. Joining me now is Matete Thulare, who is the head of FX execution at Rand Merchant Bank. Matete, very good morning to you. What's moving the markets this Friday morning? The rand sharply reversed its gains.
Good morning, Paul. Yes, the rand taking a beating yesterday after Wednesday's outperformance post the budget speech by Minister Godongwane. The local unit losing just over 1.7% yesterday, trading all the way up to 1916 in the afternoon session. Now, the weakness can largely be attributed to the stronger dollar rather than any local factors. Once we broke that 19 handle, stop losses got triggered, and the move up to 1950 was very swift. Locally, the budget is out of the way, which has seen mildly positive by the market, but investors are now turning their focus onto the upcoming elections at the end of May. And also just from the US data points, that remains strong, and it points to a resilience in the US economy. Fed officials coming out last night saying they're going to continue with the mantra that interest rates will be held higher for longer, obviously maintaining that position and obviously watching what happens from an inflation perspective. The rand this morning gets underway at 1916 to the dollar, and I think if we do see a break above that 1920 level, definitely we start targeting the 1935 levels on the top side.
I'm hoping the quality of this line will hold for a little bit longer, but Treasury is looking to lower the South African inflation target band, a move that the SARB has long been wanting. How would this make the economy more competitive and ease the pressure on the rand? And perhaps how realistic is it to achieve when inflation already edges in the upper end of the 4 to 6% band?
Look, National Treasury has urged the central bank to be a bit more upfront about the effect of fiscal policy on inflation. They have said that there has to be more technical work that has begun at an appropriate level for inflation targeting for the economic context, and whether this should take the form of a data point or a range in terms of inflation. But now the central bank has shown its ability to stabilize inflation and also anchor inflationary expectations. Now the question arises as to whether the current definition of the target is the most appropriate, given the inflation differentials between ourselves and our trading partners. Now, the inflation target was set at 3 to 6% when the government introduced this policy in 2000. Now, plans to lower it to 3 to 5% has never went ahead. But now in 2017, you saw Lesetja Kganyago making it abundantly clear that the inflation targeting is at that 4.5 midpoint of the range, and obviously to anchor inflation expectations and also the inflation rate at a point whereby it's obviously not allowing it to hover near the top of the range. Now, the central bank has made it clear that any future decision must be based on evidence, and I think this is why they're doing all this background work, and also that it needs to be communicated in a transparent manner. So most probably there will be a change of policy in terms of how do we look at inflation expectations going forward. But before that, I think a lot of work has to be done by both the National Treasury and also the central bank.
According to the Green Transmission Company, 22.5 gigawatts of renewable energy will come to the grid by 2028. What are the details there?
So, look, it's quite an interesting transaction. The Green Transmission Company, that is a private company that provides end-to-end solutions for the financing, development, and construction of grid infrastructure. And they've said that they have projects that will connect about 22.5 gigahertz of renewable energy by 2028. This is about 30 billion rands worth of renewable energy projects that will be connected to the grid. Now, the company is quite an interesting one because it is led by energy sector veterans. This includes the likes of Mr. Enos Banda, who was a former Eskom CEO, and obviously they specialize in the development of finance and also building this grid infrastructure for the renewable energy developers. Now, The project itself combines projects, it has a combination of projects that, I think they're going to accelerate the access to the grid. And I think this has to be done within the next 3 years. But also for me, the interesting aspect to it is that the lack of available grid connection capacity is obviously one of the biggest challenges and hurdles standing in the way of connecting new renewable energy generation capacity to the grid. Now, expanding the transmission grid will obviously contribute to ending load shedding by allowing more generation capacity to be connected. But I think obviously, like they've said, it's a 3-year, 4-year project that they have to implement. And obviously, it's going to be quite interesting as to whether it will be 30 billion or obviously it will be a bit more. But I think at this point in time, the mere fact that it is being led by a lot of veterans in that sector means that we are headed in the right direction.
And a grey list still hangs over South Africa. Are we making any progress getting into the good books?
Look, at this point in time, I don't think we've made sufficient progress to warrant a reclassification before next year. I think at this point in time, yes, the government has made considerable progress due to the crucial reforms that they've undertaken. It remains unclear whether these will be enough to obviously remove us from the grey listing. I mean, if you just look at it, the UAE just earlier this week was one of the countries that was removed from the grey listing. As at last year in October, the FATF did say that they have formally re-rated 15 of the 20 deficiencies as no longer deficient, but we still need to address the 5 outstanding technical deficiencies that we have with them. The government has responded by building a financial system that it believed it would be less vulnerable to abuse, and obviously where abuse occurs, the perpetrators would be effectively prosecuted. But like we've said, a lot of work still needs to be done, and I think it's going to probably take another year or another year and a half before we can see ourselves being removed from that grey listing.
Yeah. In company news, the market didn't respond positively to Pick n Pay wanting to raise 4 billion rand. What's going on at the retailer? I mean, is it an end of an era? Are we likely to see job losses on the horizon?
Look, Pick n Pay have said that they're planning to raise the rights issue of around 4 billion rand and obviously listing its discount grocery chain in the form of Boxer to shore up near-term liquidity cash. Obviously, this is on the back of debt increases, and I think what you've seen there yesterday, the market didn't take too kindly to that, where you saw the share price tumble by 17%. That's their biggest, single day fall on record. And also they've warned that they're going to swing to a full year headline loss. Now, if you remember, they have Sean Summers, who's the new CEO. I mean, he's just came back and he's been tasked with turning the company around, and obviously they've been losing market share to the likes of ShopRite, and obviously this is something that is obviously hurting them. I mean, the retail sector is also hurt by the fact that there's high interest rates, inflation, and energy costs. Now, the rights issue is expected to take place in the middle of this year, with the listing of Boxer happening next year. The group intends to obviously still have a majority stake in Boxer. Now, also the Ackerman family, who did found Pick n Pay and obviously is one of the controlling shareholders, has given support for this proposed plan to obviously, make sure that there's this rights issue and also list Boxer next year. So I think if anything, it's one of those things that there is a strategy and obviously a plan that they are trying to follow. And I think it's a case of waiting and seeing how this plays itself out over the next few months.
Very well, Matete Thulare, Rand Merchant Bank executive, their head of executive, giving us a sense of what is still to come in the world of business and a market update. Matete is the head of FX executive at the Rand Merchant Bank.